Hi, I'm Shan Wu with a undercolor of law analysis of the newest ridiculous executive orders that have been put forth by the Trump regime. So these are executive orders directed at Miles Taylor and Chris Krebs. You might be asking, who? Miles Taylor, it's ancient history now, was chief of staff in Trump's first term to the director of Homeland Security. I don't know if the director then was John Kelly or Nielsen. Suffice to say, he was a top official at the Department of Homeland Security. What made him get on Trump's radar screen? He wrote an anonymous opinion piece, an op-ed, and then an anonymous book criticizing the Trump first administration, portraying himself as one of a legion of resistors within Trump 1. Now, at the time, I really disagreed with that, not the opinion they expressed, but this whole idea of being an anonymous resistor and resistors within the government, because frankly, I felt that they should have gone public with the problems they were seeing and simply quit rather than going along with it. I mean, the fact that he later wrote a book to make money off of that, reminds me a little bit of these folks who years later, it's like they want to do these tell-alls about all the horrible, unconstitutional, authoritarian things that were going on, which they didn't say anything about then. But now they want to publish a book about it. All right, I digress. The other guy, Chris Krebs, he was the cybersecurity chief in charge of safeguarding elections. He was put in there because Trump was concerned about all these rumors about foreign interference. And unfortunately for Trump, he reported that there had been no foreign election interference in terms of changing anything in 2020. And he pointed out that the elections had been secure. So Trump really didn't like that. And then Trump says that all of these folks are guilty of treason, and he revoked their security clearances, the usual Trump regime treatment of people. He also directed DOJ to, quote, review their government service, suggesting and probably hoping that you can find some sort of criminal investigation to open up or even to charge them with something. Now, I want to focus in a little bit on the treason piece of this. Trump always goes on and on about everyone is committing treason, etc., probably because he loves the idea of treason theoretically being punishable by death. I mean, I'm not sure the last person put to death for treason. Maybe it was the Rosenbergs for the atomic secrets. I'm not even sure they were punished under that particular act or not. Nothing says MAGA cosplay to be a strong man, like invoking violence and death all the time. But his use of the legal term treason is so ignorant that honestly, it's lending it too much credibility to even have to talk about it. But let's just try and clear it up. So here's the federal law on treason. We'll put up the screenshot. 18 U.S.C. 2381. Treason, whoever owing allegiance to the United States levies war against them or adheres to their enemies, giving them and comfort within the United States or elsewhere, is guilty of treason and shall suffer death or shall be imprisoned not less than 5 years and fined under this title not less than $10,000 and shall be incapable of holding any office under the United States. If you recall, that's why so many people wanted Trump being charged and convicted with treason so he couldn't hold office anymore. But if you just read the plain language here, there's a lot of problems with the elements here to fit most instances of offenses which might involve mishandling national security information, even espionage to some extent. Because if you break it down in this context, you don't need to be a constitutional law scholar to ask, okay, these two fellows, how do they fit into the levying war against the United States? And who are the enemies? What, like the enemy would be when Miles Taylor wrote his opinion piece? It's like the readers of the New York Times are the enemies? I mean, what's going on with that? The people who bought his book? It just completely does not fit. Who was the enemy when Chris Krebs tweeted that the 2020 election was not stolen? Who was the enemy when in his head, his role as head of cybersecurity, he is trying to secure elections and says that, the elections were safeguarded, Russia didn't get into the whole election system and steer it in any direction or the other? I mean, the other foreign powers that he was working to safeguard our elections against? Is he somehow, in cahoots trying to help them? No, it makes no sense whatsoever. And this is why you see why it's so necessary in Trump's logic, or the logic of his regime, to keep saying over and over again, anyone who disagrees with me, anyone who is willing to say that the 2020 election was not stolen, must be an enemy of the state, because that's the only way he can keep getting to treason, sort of, get to it. Now, also, let's look at the Constitution, because treason's actually in the Constitution, very similar language to the codified version of it. We'll put it up for you. It says, treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them, meaning the United States, or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. Same problem, right? Who is the enemy here? Now, Article 3, Section 3, Clause 2 has an interesting addition to that. We'll put that up. It says, Congress shall have power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall be work or corruption of blood or forfeiture, except during the life of the person. Now, that's fairly awkward language. It's even hard to get through it reading, but it raises a very interesting point, this language of attainder. So the Constitution prohibits a so-called Bill of Attainder, and just recently, Professor Harold Koh wrote a really important piece in Just Security. We'll put up the link for you here. And what he is explaining there is that this whole sequence of events where President Trump began signing this series of unprecedented executive orders targeting law firms, universities, lawyers, but in particular the law firms, because so much of that was personally directed at people who had worked for the firms, the individual lawyers, and the names of the firm. And his point here is that if you look at that from a legal and constitutional perspective, you'll see that that in and of itself is a violation of separation of powers because of the prohibition against Bill of Attainders. What is a Bill of Attainder? That's where the legislative branch passes a law directed at punishing somebody. So the law can say that, Jack Smith is guilty of treason. That's our law. Okay, so what's the problem with that law? Well, you bypassed the whole process, right? You didn't have a charge, you didn't have an investigation, didn't have a trial, didn't have a conviction. You're just making a law that says so-and-so is guilty of something. That's the Bill of Attainder in a nutshell. So what Professor Koh is pointing out here is that this whole structure of using executive orders to attack people is basically a Bill of Attainder. And the Constitution prohibits Congress, the legislative branch, from issuing bills of attainder. This is not just some theoretical legal academics musings here. During the TRO hearing on the Perkins-Coie law firm case, Judge Beryl Howell specifically asked about this, saying that these sorts of executive orders they're standing in for law could be subject to a Bill of Attainder constitutional bar. Remember, the executive order kind of has the force of law. It's not a law because it's not being issued by Congress, but it has a force of law here. And clearly Trump's trying to use it in that manner, right? He's trying to say, I'm issuing a law that says these people have done something wrong and that they have to be punished for it. So it's very interesting. The lawyer for the government's response to that was, oh, Judge, the Constitution only talks about prohibiting Congress from doing Bill of Attainders. And rather interestingly there, right, the suggestion is that wouldn't apply to the president. Hold aside the fact the president can't make laws, right? But that's the point that they're trying to get at here, is to kind of circumvent this idea that the president wouldn't be prohibited by that. The whole point of the Bill of Attainder in the Constitution is to stop this kind of targeting of people by a very powerful monarch, because it started in the 14th century, the history of not liking Bill of Attainders, but they're being used then. Someone kind of historically interesting and famous was used against was Jack Cade. And you may remember who Jack Cade is that he was a character in Shakespeare's plays, but he was actually a real person. He had led a rebellion against the king, and the Parliament at that time did issue a law specifically directed at him. And it's kind of ironic, right? Because the Jack Cade from the Shakespeare play from Henry VI is the one whose right-hand man, Dick Butcher, gives this famous line, quote, "The first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers," because he wants to support this lawless regime. And Shakespeare's point was, if you want to support tyranny, you first get rid of the law, you get rid of the lawyers. Now, Cade, in real life, was posthumously beheaded, drawn, and quartered. So, interesting ending to that. But this particular theory that the executive orders are unconstitutional, I mean, not only because they're beyond the authority of the president to do, but this theory that they are violating the Constitution because they're the equivalent of a Bill of Attainder, targeting specific people with laws without giving them the benefit of any process. That's an important legal point. Watch for that to be made in these continuing challenges to the executive orders. So we'll keep an eye on that with you. Thanks again for replies and comments. Always good to talk to you, and we'll talk to you again soon.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.